Welcome back to Switch to Linux, and today we are going to be talking about how the various distributions have discussed age verification laws, age attestation, and whatever else we want to call these silly bills. Thanks for checking out this video by Switch to Linux. If you like this type of content, subscribe to the channel if you've not already done so. Leave us a like and a comment down below. And today we want to talk a little bit more about the age verification, attestation, or whatever else we're calling them all this week, because there are a couple of different terms out here that it is worth mentioning. And what I want to talk about here today is mention that there are New York has proposed now its law. Of course, we knew this was coming, which is very much like the Texas law, requires some form of commercially viable means of determining it. So to be clear, the California and the Colorado were more of an attestation. So you start the device up and it asks you, hey, what age bracket is this particular user for? And then it trusts you as the person setting it up to determine what content will be showed to that individual user. The Texas and the New York bills, these are age verification bills. And the difference on these ones is that those particular bills require some outside source to verify that this age is what it is. Now, this is obviously a lot worse for privacy, but also a lot more difficult to pull off because, again, they're still running around like you got to verify with an ID. Most middle schoolers don't have one of those, which is why the California and Colorado made a little bit more sense. A parent would set the device up. Now, of course, I argued in a video not too long ago that we need to stop all of this crazy nonsense and simply add digital neglect laws to parenting laws across this nation. Because, frankly, kids aren't going out and buying $1,000 devices, $2,000 devices. They're not setting up all these things. They're not paying for their internet bill. If they are doing those things, hey, they're probably upper teens and they've earned it. All right. But for the most part, kids are getting hurt on the internet because parents aren't watching them. If kids get hurt in their house, it's called neglect. And state authorities come in when there's evidence of this, and they actually start prosecuting the parents for neglect. If children are, they get these really malnourished look and they're constantly hungry and maybe stealing food at school, they can suggest that they're being malnourished. And then, again, you go and investigate it and things. All right. Well, if kids are showing signs and symptoms of being overstimulated by screens or being deeply impacted by what's going on the internet and on devices, maybe we need to start looking at the parents and saying, hey, you have children in this world. You have to do a more diligent job of taking care of your children in this century where digital content is all around. But the fact of the matter is, all of our devices have the ability to use multiple user accounts. They have the ability to already say about what the age is. And nearly every device already has, like we're talking about the mobile devices here, already has a means to say this is a user, even back in Windows XP days, probably earlier than that, you could set up a user that didn't have privileges to install things. Now, in my parenting video, I did discuss the situation with the one person that the device was set up without internet, and internet was later added, and then it caused all sorts of problems. And that is because we have got to recognize that there are serious consequences to giving unfiltered internet access to our children, whether that's a video game, a social media platform, or simply a web browser. But the fact of the matter is that these bills are coming out, which are, on one hand, like, why is California or why is New York even proposing such a crazy law? Because the Mississippi and the Texas law, which are effectively the same thing, are tied up in the courts right now. Okay, like why are all these states doing it? Well, it turns out that somebody followed the money, and it turns out that Meta is pretty much behind all of these. Effectively, they have a lot of violations for collecting and doing all sorts of things with kids' data that they're not supposed to. Of course, we have COPA, which prevents them from doing that. But the FTC just came out this couple weeks ago or last week and basically said, yeah, we're not going to enforce any COPA rules surrounding age verification, which is very interesting because you need that age verification to know what the age of the user is. And then once you know the age of the user, then you can start to proceed to target them in ways that you want to target them based on their age. Now, I have another solution for this. Let's suppose we do not want to have digital parenting laws. Okay, fine. Let's go ahead and just do like EU and many other places have done privacy requirements for online services. After a certain number of users or a certain number of revenue, you have to start implementing these types of features. So a website forum with 200 users does not have the same privacy restrictions as something like Facebook with millions of users in places like the EU. Maybe it should be based on the apps. Now that is what Meta is doing here, where Meta is trying to pass all these laws so that it's no longer the service being Facebook or Instagram or WhatsApp that has to verify your age. They want that passed over to the operating system level because it gets them off of the hook. So if somebody hurts themselves utilizing their system, or somebody is harmed mentally, which just the mere act of using Meta products harms you mentally, in my opinion. But if you're harmed by these and you start to sue Meta, then Meta comes back and says, it's not our problem, it's the operating system was supposed to do this. So this is just a giant billion-dollar elaborate game of pass the buck. But this is ultimately why the best line of defense is to say we need to update parenting laws for digital neglect, because it's completely impossible to do the crap that they want to do in many types of systems. Now, System 76 had a discussion with some Colorado legislators to say, hey, there's like serious problems with this, and at one level they kind of understood it and said they're going to, before it finally passes, they want to add some amendments for free and open source software. Maybe we need amendments so that anything that you do after you bring the device out of the factory is no longer on anybody else but you. So if I want to get my Windows 11 computer, sure, because Windows does all this tracking anyway, and they want to use Windows Hello with biometrics, so it's already baked into Windows, They just need to collect that age estimation and pass it on to the app at this point in time. But again, how do you manage that on an application that you download from the web? Are you going to track down every little place that has ever released a .exe file and force them to issue an update onto their software? They're looking like, what are you, a cow looking at a new gate? Huh? What are you talking about? Because these are completely untenable, completely unenforceable, and it's not to mention a violation of your First Amendment rights for creating a program that you want to do what the program says. The government starts to come in and say, well, every time you build a program, it has to have this. This is a violation of United States free speech. So we have that. We have the privacy violations. And what's holding up the Texas law, by the way, is that the court has effectively said, now, this has not been struck down. This is on an adjunction, which means that the law is still there, but it cannot be enforced right now. They can't do anything with it. They basically have to pretend it doesn't exist while it goes to the courts. The reason is, in the United States, there is a tenet of the law that a law must be as minimally invasive, which means that California and Colorado bills can pass the constitutional muster of not being invasive because a parent can choose to put their kid on a kid's plan. The parent can choose to ignore it altogether. Whereas the Texas basically said, hey, some outside company has to come in and verify the age of the user of this. And the argument before the court was, hey, this is extraordinarily invasive, which violates the tenets of creating a law in the United States. And that really is what is going on. So this kind of brings us into what I wanted to talk about. How are various Linux distributions, this is Linux and BSD. Of course, one of the first people to come out talking about all this is Midnight BSD that says, yeah, you're just not allowed to use it in those states. Is Midnight BSD going to enforce that? Probably not. So if you're in California, you're using BSD. Now, I have argued in the past, and I think this is still a decent argument, this literally is the best one because it throws everybody into giant catch-22s. Okay, he says, yeah, you're just not allowed to use it in a state that has age verification or age requirements for the operating system. So if California comes to him and says, hey, what's going on? You got to pay us a bunch of money. A kid has installed this. He says, I'm sorry, our terms of service says it's not allowed to be used in your state. So they're violating the terms of service. Are they still liable for that? Well, there's probably a legal argument to do that. But at the same time, he just goes to court and says, we have a terms of service. Everybody has to agree to terms of service. They broke the terms of service. It's not on us if they break the terms of service. It's like throwing a giant birdie finger up to the courts wanting to do this. Of course, the other factor here is that with these bills, the California bill and I think the Colorado bill as well, the problem with these bills is that the violation would be if a minor is harmed by, like if a minor has this installed. Well, how do we know all this? Especially if you're violating it and not keeping track, well, you don't know. And the only situation that arises is if some stupid parent comes and says, that application hurt my kid. Again, we need those digital parenting laws because then the state can turn around and say, why weren't you watching what your kid did on the internet? You don't let your kids walk down to the dangerous part of the city in the middle of the night to buy a Slurpee from 7-Eleven. All right? If you do, you're a bad parent and you need to be arrested for that. Or at least, investigated by child services. Maybe they don't necessarily arrest a parent for everything like that. They may just opt to remove the kid from the home. But if you cannot watch what your children are doing on the internet, you know what? That's kind of a problem. But let's go ahead and have a look at how these guys have done these. Now, there have been, first there have been some things, I've mentioned this before, but it's worth saying again. There have been people saying, Ubuntu is going to implement this. No, somebody on the mailing list was discussing it. That person sits either on, I think on the Unix forum, which would also impact Cubes. Now, Cubes basically says, hey, we're just a bunch of virtual machines. So, y'all figure it out amongst yourselves. We don't care. Okay, good for them. All right, but, Canonical's official statement is they are reviewing it. They are reviewing the laws with legal counsel, but they have no concrete changes yet. The individual developers are discussing on newsletters, which does not speak for Canonical, talking about a dbus interface, which would be an application that anybody could choose to use or simply not install or activate on a system. And so they basically say that they'll have a means in here in the dbus interface to handle age brackets locally without telemetry. And then it would be up to other distributions to adopt it. Of course, everything downstream of Ubuntu would have that available to them if that is a route they are doing. But right now, they are not actually doing anything. Elementary OS, Danielle has come out with a statement here about what they're doing. And again, they are based on an Ubuntu distribution. And so I don't know, no idea why that image is not loading. Hello, image, you want to load? So Danielle has a note here on the unfortunate need for age verification. Thanks so much for starting the conversation. Initial inclination is this should be part of the accounts portal and account service as well. I think long term that should be the goal. I'd like to see an option argument added to accounts portal to request more granular information. So this is basically when you go in and create a user account. You would have to then input either a birth date or whatever else. Now, the problem here is California, you're simply inputting what you want to input. Okay, if you think I'm going to insert my real birth date onto an operating system, you have another thing coming. All right, but if the New York and the Texas are like, nope, we need to stop right here, bring in a third-party company and verify you. How are you even possibly going to implement something like that on Linux? I mean, every distribution is just going to fork that thing on out. So Danielle here does say it's this is going to be difficult, like what you even name this. You don't want to use verification. You don't want to use declaration because there's too many trigger words on all of these different words. And so there's actually a white paper Danielle references here over on Apple, talk about helping protect kids online. You know, one of their means to implement all of this crazy nonsense. So Danielle is discussing it ultimately being a heavily Ubuntu-based distribution is probably going to rest on whatever Ubuntu ends up doing. Fedora community is exploring non-intrusive implements utilizing a local API with an etc file populated during setup to provide age brackets to apps without online verification or data sharing. Again, works with attestation, not necessarily with verification. Former project leader Jeff Spella mentioned that it's not telemetry, but minimal adjustment to meet legal requirements. So again, if it will meet the legal requirement of California and Colorado, people are welcome to ignore it or not ignore it. Now, the problem you have is, okay, the operating system now has an API. We have to now worry about the security of this API, especially since this API has to be available to every single developer. We're going to see a mass amount of software which is simply malicious to simply scrape this information. And we're going to see it everywhere. And this is what these morons passing these laws that, I mean, if you were to go to one of these lawmakers and hand them a random phone and say, what is this? Beyond a phone, like, can you identify the operating, tell me the operating system and the version number of this. If they cannot point out what that is or find that, I mean, obviously you'd have to, dig into the systems to find it. But if you don't hand them the phone, they look at it, they can go in, they recognize immediately without help that it's Android. They know, go into the systems, go all the way down to about the phone and see the Android version. Or if you hand it to them and they recognize it's iOS, go into the system settings and find the about the phone. If they can't do that basic minimum stuff on both types of phones, they have no business writing a law at all. They have no earthly idea. But that's just your basic phone. It's one thing to implement this type of thing on a lockdown platform like iPhone and what Google is trying to lock down. And this is why I've argued in another video that this is why I think Google is doing this verify your developers thing, because they're going to be forced to have multiple stores, but they do not want anything to be installed on the phone without having passed through Google's fingers first. So whether your app comes directly from Google or from some third party, in theory, every app on an official Android phone with Google Play services still has to be verified by the developer. This is why they're doing that. It's because of the Epic case allowing them to do these age verification things. But then we have the problem of my phone is Graphene OS, no Google Play services, and I install all my applications from, trusted sources that I have. There's nothing that you can possibly do because this is just running an operating system that I can install something on. Yeah. And so System 76, of course, they are particularly significant to them because they are based out of Colorado. And I had speculated, would they build this into the distribution, Pop OS, or would they build this into Cosmic, their desktop environment, or would they just let Ubuntu do it, being as that I believe they are still based on Ubuntu. And so they do make sure to mention they do not like these laws, but they may be required to comply with them. So what they actually said is that the laws do not mandate verification yet. Now, New York's, Texas do. They do mandate robust verification. The Colorado bill that they're most concerned with right now is self-attestation. And the problem is, of course, is that that's not going to be enough for them. And so eventually it's going to become, this strict, you must show your ID to get onto the internet. And so they are discussing it. They are actually having discussions with politicians, but have not actually mentioned anything as of yet. Say if there's any solace these two laws that they don't have any real restrictions, no actual age verification. Whoever installed the operating system or created the account simply says what age they are. They can lie. They will lie. They're being encouraged to lie for fear of being restricted to a nerfed internet. So that is the problem they mention is, yeah, if this is all just attestation, if the kid's setting up the system, obviously the kid's going to say they're whatever, age they want to be. If the parent is setting up, they are now going to have this question in their mind, like I had mentioned my friend's parent, okay? When I set up that iPod and I set it up without internet and the parent just, you're back again to install something else. Here, I just have the internet, and that led to problems. Okay. So many parents, in fact, many of the parents whose kids are getting caught up in this nonsense are the parents that are not parenting their kids to begin with. So all of this is changing because of the few parents that already are not good parents. And I'm not saying my friend's parent was not a good parent. I'm saying that the cases, the character AI cases, the Google cases, the Facebook cases, these cases are all because these kids were too caught up on the internet world. They were not monitoring what their kids were doing. And that's why we need the laws, the digital neglect laws. We need parental laws for this century. That way, if you do not have kids, you don't have to worry about it. If you do have kids, you have to, take care of those human beings you brought into the world. But I want my iPad. Okay, iPad children are a bane on this world. If you see evidence of an iPad child in a school, that child needs some intervention at home. And we need to look at that. Now, obviously, I am not, as I mentioned in my parenting video, have a look at that one. I am not a huge advocate of bringing in more government regulation, but focusing on protecting the kids that individuals have brought into the world is better than this weird, crazy, untenable, open to interpretation things they're trying to do to the rest of the world. Some distros are resisting. Omarchy basically said, we are not going to respond to the, quote, retarded, end quote, California law. He's not doing anything. Come at me, bro. Okay. Let's see. Andex GNU Linux distro has declared it will not implement age checks aligning with its principled stances against such requirements. Let's see what this founder of Andex says. This is Jay Mazzullo. And I want to say that I do not approve of your plans to add age verification to Debian. We have already stated on my website that my distros will not have any age checks and they are not for use in regions of OS age verification, and I request there be a way for providers of Debian-based distros to remove packages involved in age verification via root, as well as an option to blacklist certain region states like Colorado and California. So based on Debian, if Debian is implemented, I didn't actually see a statement from Debian in here. Maybe I missed it, but basically, he says, hey, if Debian is going to implement anything, I'm not going to do it. So give me a way to get rid of it. So Midnight BSD, they've basically said, yeah, you just can't use it in states that it's not allowed. So their policy changes right now, effective March 17th. You're not allowed to use it in Brazil. That should be, I think that's tomorrow from the date I'm releasing this. Effective January 1st, this will include California and any other states that have these things coming in. Yeah, it'll just not be allowed to be used if your state requires it, which is interesting. Is he going to be going around and hunting you down if you're using it in California? Nope. He's just going to be like, I'm sorry, I stated in my terms of service it's not for you. No official statement from Linux Mint yet. There's been a couple of things on the forums, but nothing specific. Since of course, their main flagship is based on Ubuntu, then whatever Ubuntu would do, they would probably do. Although, being as that Linux Mint is super privacy focused, it wouldn't surprise me if they take anything out. Because, not to get a little political, but Clem, I don't think cares about America much. I don't care about that. That's fun. It's fun. His opinion. I don't care. He makes a great distribution. He keeps politics out of it, and I love him for that. That's awesome. I would have a hard time believing that he's going to bow to American law. Arch remained publicly silent on the issue, even deleting forum posts that had brought it up. So Arch is like, no, we ain't talking about it, bro. You ain't talking about it either, bro. Okay. And so we'll kind of see what happens with that. That one down the road. SUSE has not made any public comment, possibly because they're up for sale again. What if SUSE is bought by Meta? Ooh, that would be interesting. Yes, if you did not see the news, SUSE is up for sale again. But it is European-focused company, European-focused distribution, and they're like, yeah, come get me, Gavin. Come get me. Right. Nick's community suggests they are waiting to see what larger distributions decide. Not surprising, since most of the ecosystem pays back to Debian, which I have not seen any specific official response from Debian. There is some discussion in their mailing list. Arch is like, they ain't talking about it, and you ain't talking about it either. Okay, you got Ubuntu's having discussions and talking with lawyers. Red Hat's an interesting one because this one here. Red Hat, of course, is IBM owned. IBM, of course, is a United States company. I'm wondering if they're going to do anything. And the reason I say this, if anybody has a chance of stopping this, it would be IBM. Because they still have a lot of industry power. The reason they may not is because I know the Colorado bill does. I don't remember if the California bill does. Colorado bill has a carve-out for systems which are explicitly internal industrial or business systems. And Red Hat is effectively, that's all they do. Red Hat's not like a distribution you would install on your laptop at home. They pretty much are a B2B type supplier. Everything that they do is all generally servers. All their contracts are done on, commercial grade hardware type stuff. So if anybody has a chance, it would be Red Hat of saying, hey, y'all need to stop this nonsense. In fact, Red Hat, I'm going to call on you, and IBM, I'm going to call on you to go and talk some sense into these people and overturn this nonsense and say, hey, this is not even tenable. What you're going to do is not possible with the way computers work. I would call on them to that because they're probably the ones in the best position, but I haven't seen an official statement from them. But whatever these big guys do, that probably is just going to trickle down to everything else. And what does this mean? Well, we might see a lot of interesting forks. We might see a lot of distributions which are promoting no age verification checks. We might see actual terms of services being added to Linux distributions where we've not seen them before to say, hey, you're not allowed to use this. And like that might be the only terms of service. Like, here's our terms of service. You can't use this where you have to verify your age. That'd be a funny terms of service for a Linux distribution. But that's kind of where we are. This is a crazy debate. This is a crazy situation. And the fact of the matter here is this is so untenable laws. Nearly all of them are tied up in courts. And California's is not specifically tied up in courts, but I mean, obviously Apple is working on ways to implement this. Google is, and Microsoft probably is. I haven't seen a lot on Microsoft. I haven't really looked though, to be fair. I don't know. Maybe I'll do a Windows Wednesday on what are they doing on age verification. I don't know. They know everything about you anyway, so, that's why I don't use them. This obviously works for your locked down phones, your iPhones, and your fully certified Android devices. But, there are a lot of people who use Graphene OS and who use Linux that you just can't implement this kind of stuff. Because to implement this stuff means it's locked down and the user can't do anything, but we can. So either you have to lock down every single device and take away all computer freedom, or you have to recognize these laws are completely untenable. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.